In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to upcycle plastic bags into baskets using the Coil basketry technique. You'll need plastic bags, yarn, a yarn needle, scissors, and tape. And the first thing you're going to do is taking a plastic shopping bag, create one large rectangular piece of plastic by cutting open the seam at the bottom and cutting up one of the sides. Next, you're going to roll the plastic bag up to form a long tube and twirl the tube and apply tape at intervals to form a long plastic cord. This is the core of your basket. Try to make sure that the cord you're creating is an even width as you go along taping the plastic together. This is mostly for aesthetics and to make sure that the coils of your baskets are going to look the same width, but it'll also make it easier to work with. Next, you're going to take your yarn and about 1 to 2 inches from the end of your plastic bag, you're going to tie it on there really securely. And in this example, I did a double knot just to make sure it was on there nice and tight. And then you're going to coil the yarn around your plastic bag cord towards the end of the plastic bag about 10 times. Next, you're going to fold this section in half, then bind the end of the cord to itself by winding the yarn around both and wrapping them together. This is creating the center of your basket, so go slow and make sure that everything is held together really tightly. Squish your yarn around to make sure that no plastic is showing while you do this first initial step. Once you have wound your yarn about 10 more times or reached about 1.5 inches, we're going to create the first stitch to start coiling this basket. I've been working straight off of the ball of yarn, so now I'm going to measure an arm's length and cut it. Then I'm going to thread my yarn needle, keeping it at the end of the yarn with a little bit of tail so it doesn't fall off. Next, I'm going to take my yarn needle and poke it through that center loop. You can see here my tail's a little too long, so I'm just pulling the yarn through. And then I'm going to pull that stitch tight, and it's going to pull this new loop towards the center loop, holding them together. Now to hold that stitch in place, I'm going to insert the needle under the last bit of yarn I wound around that plastic cord and pull it through, and that's going to create a nice secure stitch that will hold these loops together so that I can begin coiling again. And I'm going to wind the same number of times every time between stitches. In this example, I was coiling the yarn around 10 times and then making a stitch, but the patterns and variations are going to be up to you based off of how you want your basket to look. Depending on the weight of yarn that you're using, it is recommended that you create a stitch every 5 to 10 times that you wind the yarn around. And this is just to make sure that your basket is staying securely structured and not falling apart. So at this point we have the center and we are finishing our first coil. So we've wound the yarn around 30 times and created 3 stitches, and this is the third and last stitch here before we start our second loop. And at this point I'm going to show you how to change colors as well by tying a new color of yarn in. So I'm going to thread my needle on the new color of yarn and cut off about an arm's length. And then I'm going to tie the end of this new yarn to my old yarn. And I'm just going to leave the yarn needle on the table as I begin coiling so that it's out of the way until it's time to make another stitch. And this makes it just a lot easier to manipulate your materials while you're coiling the basket. If you hold the plastic bag core with your non-dominant hand and wind with your dominant hand and just leave the needle on the table until you need to use it, it's not getting in your way and you're not getting tangled up. So now when I'm ready to make my next stitch, instead of going through the center of the basket, I'm going under the last loop. And then I'm going again through the last bit of yarn that I wound around the core. So from here on out, every time we make a stitch, we're just going to be going underneath the last loop of whatever level we're on with the basket, however big it gets. This is going to just bind each loop to the one preceding it, which is what holds the basket together and creates its structure. When you run out of plastic bag, you're going to need to splice a new one onto it. And so to do that, you're going to just create another plastic bag rope, some more core out of your plastic bags, and then open the ends of the one that's running out to accept the new one. And you can tape those together or just hold them in place until you wind enough yarn around them that they are secure and not going to fall apart. So in this example, I am opening up that end of the last plastic bag, tucking in the new one and taping those two ends together just to keep it secure while I am coiling my yarn around this spliced area. And then I'm going to coil the yarn and create stitches just as I've been doing all along. And you can do that for as long as you want to create as big of a basket or mat as you would like until you're ready to finish. And when you're ready, the simplest way to finish your coil basket is just to create a series of stitches that will bind the end of your core to your last loop. And so when you have about an inch of your core left, you're going to create a series of 5 to 10 consecutive stitches right next to each other. And this will cover all the plastic up and securely bind the end of your core to your last loop, while creating a finished edge to your basket. The last thing you're going to want to do is tie a couple of knots by just inserting your needle and yarn through the last couple of stitches that you make and pulling those tight to create a nice little knot that you can then tuck into your loops and hide underneath your yarn with the yarn needle. There are lots of other ways to make and finish coil baskets, so if you've tried this activity at home using a different technique or you just want to share your finished product, we would love to see it. Send us a picture, and you can find more tutorials like this one on our website at uticacreativereuse.org.